How do I look? Do I look amazing?
Dude, you always look amazing.
Actually, I'm gonna change my camera real quick. Hold
You're
up.
gonna change your camera into what?
I'm gonna do the OBS camera.
Okay.
This one?
That one color renders weird, and I haven't been able to figure out why yet.
Well, it's probably the same reason that it can't find the fucking card it's attached to.
Maybe. I don't know. What are you saying?
I'm saying that there might be a bigger problem than it just the color's weird.
Well, yeah. It's about time that we take that pewter offline for a moment and wash it with a power washer and some baking soda and some lye. I think that would be.
Are we live?
Yeah, of course you are. So let's talk about Apple TV for a second.
Do I have to?
You know what? Exactly my point. Apple TV, like base Apple TV, is just basically a rip off of what Amazon's been doing for
I look like crap.
a fuck ton of time. I know that's what I said. It doesn't render the color as well, so as the other
Oh, I
camera.
was looking at basically not the color, just
Oh,
everything else.
dude, neither of us have showered in 2 days. Who fucking cares?
I showered yesterday.
Let's do the show now. This sounds like a good idea.
Let's finally do the show.
Welcome everyone to Level 1 GM. I am Chad, your Level 1 GM. I am your not smirked GM. That guy over there, that's Mike. He is a smirked GM of many levels. And we get together every week to talk about what I did wrong on the week before during my campaign of Deadlands Blood Moon. So, Mike, last week on Deadlands Blood Moon, I got you guys out there doing stuff and things. And basically, we started to encounter things, right? I was creating encounters. Some of them you went on, some of them you didn't encounter. So let's talk today about creating encounters that engage your player, and in our case would also potentially engage an audience. Let's start by let's define what an encounter is. Go.
Well, it could be defined as a few different things, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, we'll have it defined as a combat or potentially threatening experience to your players. In that maybe there'll be some monsters, or maybe there'll be some bad guys, or maybe there'll be some traps, or something like that.
Right.
An encounter, you could further define encounters as like puzzle endeavors or tense situations that could turn into something else. But I think for the purpose of keeping it simple, we'll just call it set up conflict, in which the players are potentially going to be pitted against NPCs of some variety.
Cool. So yeah, basically you're creating potential danger for your players. Cool. So as you start to look at creating encounters, I think it's important to look at encounters as really as pieces of the larger narrative. Or am I wrong?
That depends entirely. The way I handle encounters is that I like to have them at least loosely tie into the larger conflict happening. Make the monsters or bad guys in question working for an antagonist, have them sent by an antagonist, have them part of the environment, not necessarily working against you, but because of the choices your characters have made, they have put themselves in a potentially dangerous situation, and then this encounter with these whatever they are a consequence of putting themselves in that environment, in that situation. So yes, I like to use them heavily narrative. However, that's not necessarily true, especially in the case of like environmental monsters or in situational. Uh, like if you're just doing a dungeon crawl and there just happens to be stuff in there that you end up fighting, doesn't mean they're building towards some greater narrative or sent by the bad guy. Just they just could be there, and that could be part of your story as well. And then there's something I'll go into, I'm sure at some point, but throw away bad guys that are often used in all manner of adventures, which aren't part of an environment, aren't part of a narrative, and just the GM felt the need to have the players fight something.
There is a potential for randomness, I guess,
Yes,
when you
yes.
start talking about encounters, right? So weigh that, put some weight to that. What do you think that what do you think is most important? Encounters based on, should we try to keep encounters based on larger narrative, or how often is it okay to go, okay, time for some random shit?
No, I think encounters first and foremost should be viewed as a form of pacing. Um, you can do an entire campaign in which there's never a combat scenario, right? There's never a trap. There's never a puzzle put in front of them. But but that could seem a little, talk showy and kind of boring. Um, a good way to switch up the role playing and fashion more into a pure game is encounters, right? There's a lot more dice rolling. There's a lot more, numbers analysis, and even in a fight, slight puzzle solving. Oh, I hit with a 14, but I didn't hit with a 13, so we know how good its armor is. So, well, I used a fireball and that didn't seem to do any damage. So it, maybe it's resistant to sort of elemental stuff. And there's this sort of critical thinking that can happen in there that wouldn't necessarily, and puzzle solving that wouldn't necessarily happen in just role playing and speaking with NPCs. So it's a nice pace change for the narrative as a whole. And a lot of characters, and this is you as a GM need to, a lot of players, I mean, and this is something you as a GM need to figure out on your own based on what your group is. A lot of them prefer combat. A lot of players prefer the video gamey or board gamey sense of I roll the dice, I do some quick math, you tell me whether or not it was a good thing, and then I feel the sense of accomplishment. It's a very short term. I do A, B happens, and then we know what the outcome was based on C. And that's what a lot of players get the most joy out of. I mean, a lot of people love role playing. Chad and I love role playing, but a lot of players love the combat and the immediate feedback and the immediate gratification of it. And you just need to know your party. And if your party wants to fight, you need to let them fight. Like that's.
Do you find yourself reading, like say during a particular session, do you feel yourself reading your players and going, they need some combat right now, or I need to spice something up, so I'm going to throw some kind of a counter at them?
No, not really. I use it as a pure pacing tool for my narratives. I'll be like, well, we past 2 weeks have been a lot of talking, or last week was just a lot of talking. This week I'm going to put in some sort of conflict or a trap scenario or a puzzle or a combat, just so that they feel like it's not just the same thing over and over and over again, just talking. That they can use. Like a good example is for Crosden. A lot of you have chosen to be use some skill proficiency situations, so that maybe you're good at persuasion or you have deception or something like that, which are inherently role playing skills, and don't do much for combat. But then there's like Morgan, who really went into the weeds on rules and mini maxing, and he found out that he can use this particular kind of spear polearm situation and get advantages as a paladin, and he was really excited about it. And I knew he was excited about it, so I'm like, well, we need to make sure that he's being
Right.
able to utilize his character the way he wanted to utilize that character. And the only way to properly do that is combat. So I just try to keep it balanced enough, keep throwing stuff in so that everybody feels like they're using their character and not just one part of it, but all of it. Because if it's just all talking all the time, you should just all pick bards and then,
Right.
just be done with it.
So as you approach, creating a campaign,
35. Yeah.
do you think about encounters as you're thinking of plot points as you're moving forward when you develop it? Or are
Yes.
you looking,
Sorry. Continue.
just to finish the question, are you looking at are you looking at encounters more on a session by session basis?
Sometimes they're major plot points. Let me try to think back to an older one. So I'm not using the current campaign to give anything away. Shadowrun would be a good one. Towards the beginning of that campaign, there is a showdown with another Shadowrun group. You were the anti-Shadowrun division, and very, very early to that, there's a showdown with another Shadowrun group. I very specifically crafted this group, crafted their characters, spent time giving them backstories, mini maxing a little bit on their abilities and stuff like that, because I wanted them to feel like your nemesis. I wanted them to feel like these are anti-us, even though personality-wise and aesthetic-wise, they weren't even close to who you were. But I wanted to make them feel. I came here for the spoilers. I wanted you as players to feel like there are beings as good as us on the other side, and we need to try to outmaneuver these things because a straight one-on-one fight didn't go that well the first time. So it was always going to be conflict, an open combat conflict the first time you ran into it. Always.
So that's encounters as plot points. That encounter is going to happen as part of my plot point, and this is what's going to happen. So let's talk about how do you approach from a session by session basis. How do you
session by session basis? That's where it comes cleanly down to pacing for me. If the session before or the couple sessions before, and you guys, running for Wednesday for sure, you guys will really get into the weeds of character development and conversations and really want to travel the extra few steps or go the extra mile to converse and gain knowledge from NPCs in the world around you. Like last week was a good example. You were pretty sure you had evidence against Duncan's father, and you're pretty sure you knew someone to talk to about that and where to go, but you wanted to be extra sure. So you went to Duncan's stepmother's house, which was quite a ways away, required time and effort to get there, and resources. And you just wanted to be sure, just for a conversation. Not, I feel fortunate in that I have a group that will do that, but not every group's going to be like that.
Right.
So if I feel like it's been a session or two, or if it's been a little slow conversation wise, I'll just go, okay, let's interject something here to pick up the pace and make sure there's a little bit of conflict. Sunday, we have a different group in that while it's Phil, Morgan, and Laura still, right? And they fairly like role playing. We've Morgan's a little split on that, I would say, as a player. He's half and half on what he enjoys.
He still likes to kill shit, but he's getting he's digging the role playing for
we also have Marcus and Josh, and Josh as a role player is basically Dumb comment. Let me do a good dumb comment here. Let me say a joke here. Let me purposefully say something stupid here. Everyone gives a good laugh, and then I'll be quiet for half an hour. And then Marcus, who purposely built a character because he didn't feel comfortable talking all that much, purposely built a character who was quiet and didn't want to talk to people, but did well in combat. That's what he wanted to do. So that's a much more combat heavy group. So I'm trying to balance like once a session, once every other session, make sure that there's legitimate conflict in that, an encounter in that. Now, I did do something that wasn't combat, but it was considered an encounter for that group, which I think is we should maybe touch on real quick. Okay. They find themselves right now. I'm not going to go into the narrative details of being there, but they find themselves right now in this near this village of this tribe called the New Sky. They're a group of Goliaths. They had to go there because potentially these people knew about this ancient ruins and they wanted to go investigate this thing. Okay. I knew they wanted to have fights. I know this group wants to have fights. So on the way there, I say, random bandit group attacks you while you're in your boat. They have another boat. They sail up behind you. Their boat is smaller and quicker, and you have too much weight on it, so they catch you, and now you got to fight on boats in the middle of this river. And they said, okay, they did it, and they did a great job, and they really curb stomped them. You know, this is what I like to call a feel-good encounter.
Right.
Give them something a little easier, so they just kick the crap out of it, and then they go, man, we're awesome. The characters we made that do the damages and use the spells and stuff like that, they effectively do it, and I feel good about it.
I am powerful. Yes.
And it's not for the purpose of narrative. It's not for the purpose of challenge. It's for the purpose of making your players feel good about their characters. That's the point of that.
And then you hit him in the face with a 2x4.
Well, that just happened at the end of this last episode. But yeah, and then I'm like, well, next episode they're going to be hanging out in this village. They're finally going to get there. They're going to be hanging out in this village, and it's a Goliath village. Now, Goliaths in D&D 5e are competitive sort. They love competition and hunting, and they live high in the mountains and consider physical fitness to be incredibly important. So, to gain entrance to the village, every single person in the group had to pick their challenge, and it was strength, agility, and endurance. What they got to choose from, every single person. And strength was a grappling contest, not to the death, just hands only. First person to tap out or get knocked out, that's it. It's over.
Nice.
Agility, they're a village in a cave, very tight, close together buildings. You have to run from the steps of one side using only the rooftops and get to the other side of the cavern, the cavern, and touch the wall.
Parkour.
Nice. Yeah, it's parkour. Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's a lot of acrobatics checks and dexterity saves and stuff like that. And then I put, perception in there to see if they can figure out which way to go. The strength check is combat. It's just a one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat. Point of hand-to-hand in 5e is that it doesn't do much damage unless you're specifically a monk. And then endurance, to provide a comedic element, they have bait that they use to catch scavenger birds and mountain lions, and they had to eat it. They put them in little bowls, and it was an eat-off. Whoever could keep it down, whoever could first swallow it with a wisdom saving throw, and then keep it down with a constitution saving, and continue to do that until somebody lost.
And all of those different kinds of encounters, right?
They are.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
And the point of it is, again, this is much more challenging than the bandit fight, even though it's not a fight, because these are all one-on-one. You had no backup.
Yes.
And while there were no life and death consequences to the encounters, there was a matter of pride amongst all the characters. Marcus specifically, coming to mind, failed his agility trial against somebody from the village, and for for the remainder of the episode was angry about it, and then at the end ended up challenging an NPC to do the same thing again because he just had to get another shot at it. An encounter doesn't have to be combat, even though more often than not it will be, just for the sake of there's a lot of readily available stats and numbers and stuff online. But you need encounters, and you need to know how much your players want them, because it changes pace, provides conflict, and gives them something to do that isn't just talking.
Let's look at a session-based encounter, and you're creating an encounter for a particular session
from scratch. Okay.
From scratch. Where do you start? What do you look at first? Where do you go from there?
Well, the first thing I think about is where the party is. I'm assuming this isn't like something I've planned for ahead of time.
Right.
Well, first and foremost, I think about where the party is. This goes back to a little bit to last time we did the show, last episode. Everything needs to fit to the environment, and that's just where I'm at. As a GM, it needs to make sense. So I often will filter my searches, and I'll use online searches in a bunch of different places, D&D Beyond. Let me pull up my resources real quick because I have them all saved to my shit. Donjon. Donjon.com is an excellent source for basically everything fantasy role playing. And I'll put in like what environment they're in: coastal, underwater, forest. And then I'll go, okay, well, it needs to cater to their level. So, let's say we have 4 players at level 7. Well, there's plenty, again, of online encounter calculators. If I was a better GM and could just do that in my head, it would be possible. But at the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide online, a bunch of different places, there are tables to, how hard do you want it? Easy, medium, hard, and then deadly, I think, is the top commonly used for 5e anyway. And then I'll, as soon as I have it outlined what sort of CR or what combat level it needs to be, what environment they're in, then I can narrow down to just like what narrative makes sense for that given point in the story that doesn't feel so out of place. I don't think this is overly important. It's totally based on style in this. I would say it's better if you don't just try to shoehorn in a fun monster you've heard about, unless you're doing like a one-shot, sort of thing where it doesn't matter really. If you're doing a longer form campaign and you're working on this world and crafting it, it really does need to make sense contextually what you have your players going up against, whether it be, a monster that fits to the scene or a particular grouping of bad guys that they've seen before. And then there's always like, you can take you can take like, for the purposes of narrative, you can take stuff that they should be able to beat really bad and then just make it stronger for the purposes of your narrative, right? Like you just say, oh, these guys look a little tougher than the ones you've seen before. And then you just bump all their stats a little bit. Just for the sake of making it, it fits within your environment, fits within context. They fought them before, so they understand these as antagonistic creatures of some kind. And but they're a little stronger now, so we need to make the creatures a little stronger now. There's nothing wrong with that. especially if you can properly relay as the GM that, yeah, they look stronger now. You know, they have better weapons, or you know, this one guy particularly, he's got glowing runes on his face. So you can tell he's really a good spellcaster. And then you can just drop a fireball on their ass, and they'll just like, oh fuck, he really is strong.
How often does an encounter, I guess, become more of a sudden thing? Like, you know, how often are you in the middle of a session and you're like, okay, they've made some choices. An encounter here is necessary. And
This almost exclusively applies to antagonistic murder hobo campaigns. I know what you're going for here. Yeah. They made some bad decisions. They pissed some people off, and now these people are going to fight them right there on the spot. And they don't give a shit about rules or decorum. They believe that your players deserve a fucking ass whooping, and sometimes they do. In the case of that, this is actually kind of hard, and something I like to plan for ahead of time. Something I'll do at the beginning of a campaign, or at tent poles in the campaign, like every time I level up a group, I will go through and I will make random bad guy stat, and it's something I just throw in a file on my computer. And it could just be soldier, could just be, you know, fighter, could be, you know, archer, spellcaster, doesn't matter. Nameless, blah 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 blah. You have this, and if they piss somebody off, hey, there's the thing now. and that's something I do. You could also just use the internet. There's plenty of resources of just like, give me a minute. Google D&D 5e NPC guard, right, and you'll get a list of guards.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because there's plenty of people that have used that before you. We live in the year 2020. We have the internet. As a GM, if you can't just come up with stats off the top of your head that feel appropriate to the level of your players, don't. There's no reason to try to fudge it and get it wrong.
Right.
You have the internet. Use the internet.
So it's a little bit of preparation, but also knowing the tool sets that are available with you. I think we continue to sort of come back to this idea of preparation. Like the more prepared, the more you understand your own story when you start a particular campaign, the better you are prepared to do a lot of things. And I feel like that encounters, like that breadcrumbs can lead to encounters that can lead to tent poles, or that are tent poles. And then they don't have to be separate events either. You know, encounters can be breadcrumbs that are tent poles in your campaign. You know what I mean? Like a good example for Crosden. You guys had fought Minotaurs before, right? And then I just put one in your safe space in the library. You always thought of the library as a safe space. When you go there, you called base. Your mom said your brother couldn't tag you anymore, and you were good. And then, for the purpose of breadcrumbs, I just drop bad guys in your safe space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, brother done went and tagged you anyway. Damn it.
I wanted to do this before we end. There's, in my mind, a few different kinds of encounters.
Right.
There's a pacing encounter, something you need to do to just keep the pacing moving and to keep people interested in the campaign. And pacing encounters can be, they should be slightly difficult, but not push the characters too far. There's a feel-good encounter. Those I like to do at as pacing encounters sometimes, or at the start of a new level. In the level up process to make the players feel like, oh, I have improved in some way. Or I'll do that directly after a major encounter to comfort the party in thinking that it's not always going to be terrible.
Right.
There are also true challenges. that I like to use. And true challenges are designed to hurt, but not kill.
Right.
A true challenge in Crosden, a good example, was the fight right before that library fight, when you fought 2 Minotaurs and then a bunch of cultists in that basement. You were locked in a tight hallway. You didn't know where they were coming from, but they knew how to get around. You were kind of split up because there were multiple entry points. It hurt a lot of you, but didn't kill any of you.
Right.
Like, that's the point. A true challenge. And then there's teaching a lesson. Sometimes your players, for whatever purpose, need to be taught a lesson. And that lesson should always be harsh. Now, times in which this is appropriate, that they are going full murder hobo and it's taking the fun out of your enjoyment as a GM a bit. They are actively trying to rebel against you as the GM. You know what I mean? They're noting the breadcrumbs, they're noting the plot points, and refusing to partake in any way, shape, or form. Biting off more than they can chew, and just being dickish. There's a lot of players a lot of bad players that use the phrase, "That's what my character would do." Well, you made a shit character, and that's what you did. In these particular scenarios, you should prove a point, and that point is that your players have asked you as the GM to be in charge. They have asked you to run a thing for them and give them the responsibility only of running their own character, and you have the responsibility of running the world. Well, they need to keep that in mind. There's a lot of preparation, a lot of work going into being a GM. If they're not keeping that in mind, then you should fucking remind them with baby powder. Now, I very rarely had to do that to your group, right? Like,
right. I don't remember you ever having to do that in a game I was part of.
No.
So
I think I had to do that once in the Trials of Mustafa Regal, but that's because we had one Corbin Ottoman that was playing, and
Corbin,
that dude needs his character killed once a session, probably.
Oh man!
But you have run into a true challenge borderline that could have turned into a lesson when Umberlee attacked Crosden. That very easily, if you were not paying attention to the clues I was giving you, very easily could have gone from a true challenge into I'm teaching you a lesson. Yeah. You need to pay attention now.
Indeed.
That the evil campaign ended that way because of Corbin. Yeah, it ended slightly early because he decided he was going to get mouthy with a literal god. So, I just all right. I'm like, all right, roll for initiative. Yep. I just had him. It was a level 20 monster, and I just had to smack him.
Oh, Corbin. All right, top 3 things to think about while you are creating an encounter.
Top 3 things. 1, do you need one? Have you been packing your campaign or your adventure so full of encounters that perhaps those players that are more interested in RP aren't getting that RP experience that they're looking for? You need to know where the balance lies with your players, and you need to adjust appropriately. 2, keep track of. We didn't really go into this, but it's kind of in the balancing. Keep track of your players' abilities. It's much easier now in the digital age in which they can, give you PDF copies, or D&D Beyond has copies of the characters, or something like that.
Right.
If you want to challenge them, and you can do that just by taking a cursory glance at what they're good at, what they're not good at, and you don't even have to look at their character sheets all that often. If you just
Right.
play for a little while, you'll generally get a good grasp of what they're looking for. Make it appropriate. Make the challenge appropriate. There's no reason to punish people overly harshly.
All right. And third.
Third, I would say keep things appropriate to the given time. Make the bad guys context appropriate to the campaign you're working on. Make the enemies level appropriate to what you're working on at the time, unless for a narrative standpoint it requires otherwise.
Right.
And make the length of the encounter appropriate for the time in the session. This is difficult.
Right.
You need to keep track of how you need to keep an actual timer. This is something I do. Time how long the first round of combat takes. The first and second round will always be the longest rounds of combat because people are, oh yeah, what is I need to look at the, let me see, and then there'll be a little bit of that. After that, it'll speed up.
Right.
They've reread their stuff. They've gotten quick on the dice. They know what order.
Right.
And if it's going too long, make it shorter. Yeah. Change up HP pools. Make it easier to hit. Have the thing run away.
Yeah.
If it's going too short, feel free to buff your character on the fly. They can't look at the stats in front of you. So what are they going to do?
Right. So essentially, it continues to come back around to, preparation is very important.
Yes.
Know your players, know your story, know what's appropriate. Yeah. And I think what we're also kind of saying is that random encounters probably aren't as random you think random means.
No.
Right. There you go. Cool. All right, everybody. There you go. Episode 4, creating encounters. Now, remember, everything that we talked about here, you can find somewhere. You can see us live on Twitch, Durnk Industries. We're three campaigns every week, plus this show. And you can catch up on YouTube. All right? Just figure out where we is. Durnk Industries. Come find us. And also, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
If you want to hang out with us on Discord, come see us live, and we'll give you that invite. So come hang out.
Yes, please. Real quick shout out to some easy resources I do use online.
Yeah, please.
D&D Beyond, Roll20 Compendium, Donjon, Kassoon, Kassoon, and Incarnate. Those are just some Incarnate for top-down maps. The rest of those are just for stats and encounter building.
Yeah. So again, be prepared.
Yep.
Super simple. All right, everybody. Have fun. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
Goodbye.
Bye. See you later.
Damn right, I stole your water bottle. What are you going to do?
There wasn't water in that bottle.
Nerd!
There was no water in that bottle.